Plutus Foundation. And with me today is Athena Lent from Money Smart Latina. So how are you doing today, Athena?
I am good. I am just hanging out with the cat. I thought maybe he was gonna come in and do a drive-by video bombing like he's done in the past, but I think for now we're okay. How are you?
Super excited. Actually, I'm really excited to talk to you about this because this is an issue that I think gets overlooked a lot in the personal finance community. We spend a lot of time talking about different things that people can do to improve their finances, but a lot of the time those things are pretty much aimed at folks who aren't particularly vulnerable.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's talk about that a little bit right now, especially in light of the current COVID-19 pandemic. So who is at most risk right now?
Okay, so I just want to foremost say all of this is my opinion, but I do read a lot of news and it's not just CNN. So I like to say I'm very well versed with the world of politics and news. But so this is my opinion. So in my opinion, communities of color and people who are either disabled or supporting a disabled person as a caretaker are the ones that are actually really high risk right now during COVID-19.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's worth noting too that you actually work with at-risk communities in your regular work, right? In the course of your job, you work with at-risk communities.
Yeah, so I work for a nonprofit in Phoenix, Arizona. It's a chapter of a national nonprofit. And so our goal is to get youth graduated out of high school and then get them onto their post-secondary plan, whether that's going on to higher ed or going into a trade or going straight into the workforce. A lot of our youth have been affected by COVID-19. Some of them have lost their jobs. A lot of their parents have lost their jobs. And so we're just trying to figure out how to connect them to different resources in the community, connect them to jobs, make sure they're okay, make sure their families are okay. So we've been putting out a lot of COVID-19 fires for the past month.
Yeah, I can totally see that. So now you mentioned some of these communities that are more at risk. Why, how does this situation make them more at risk? And what are some of the risks that they face?
Okay, so I'm going to be looking at my notes because I did some more research and I just want to make sure I am organized with my all over the place brain. So I say, my opinion. So there's not a lot of resources for people of color and invisible illnesses for a variety of reasons. One of them that a lot of people don't like to discuss or admit is the systematic racism that we're still dealing with. Yes, segregation ended in 1963 or 4 or 5, whatever it was, but you have to stop and think that went on for hundreds of years and it's only been 50 or 60 years and that's still stuff that we have to break out of. So people were doing it for hundreds of years. It's not going to happen overnight. And it's just like that saying, Rome wasn't built in one day. So a lot of that still affects us to this day, such as the historic practice of redlining. So if you go back to the theory of the Chicago school, it was just different zones and communities. And so once you were able to transition out of the inner city or where the factories were and move to the suburbs, a lot of people that were Caucasian were able to do that, but not so much communities of color. They were redlined, they were kept in certain neighborhoods, and that's why you actually had the Fair Housing Act passed in 1963, I think it said. But that was one of the reasons that they had to have that passed anyways, because people were being eliminated from certain neighborhoods. Also, you have a lot of communities of color are stressed because of their lack of financial resources, or a lot of people who are just stressed in general. Stress causes inflammation, and they have found that inflammation causes a lot of health problems. So whether it's high blood pressure or heart disease or asthma, inflammation can cause a lot of different things. Some people even think it causes cancer. That's left to be undecided, but a lot of stress leads to a lot of inflammation, and inflammation leads to chronic illness that you already have and chronic health conditions. So that being said, I feel like that's one of the reasons that we're more at risk. And all this stuff has been backed by science, and it's actually in the National Labor of Health and Science. And I can go ahead and forward you guys the link in the study if that's something that you want to read more about. And
Definitely. So
my specialty, sorry to cut you off, my specialty and my little soapbox, of course, is the Latina community. And one of the reasons that Latinos have been affected, there is a study that says in NBC that 4 out of 10 Latinos are actually currently unemployed due to COVID-19 in New York City. And a lot of Latinos don't typically or traditionally do jobs that have telecommuting as an option or telework as an option. Latinos are entering the workforce at a higher rate than ever before, and they are graduating with higher ed degrees than ever before. But like I said, again, we're trying to play catch up, and that's why Latinos earn 53 cents to every Caucasian male's $1.
yeah, so now you talked about this a little bit, but you mentioned how in these jobs that some of these Latinos are doing, like you can't be like telework, but some of the issue too, right, is that that these are also folks that are kind of considered essential services. So they might be forced into going to work. They cannot take advantage of this the unemployment part of the CARES Act, right? Because a lot of states are actually setting up ways for people to report fraud if somebody is just refusing to come back to work. So even if their job was shut down for a little bit and they were able to take unemployment, now these are communities that are more likely to be forced back into work before time, and they don't have any choice, because if they don't go back to work, then they'll be reported and then they won't be able to get the unemployment benefits.
So I haven't heard too much about that. I've actually heard that, I'm not disagreeing with you, but I've actually heard a lot of people that have had success under the CARES Act. I understand that, a lot of Latinos and a lot of other people are considered essential workers, but I have heard some good things about the CARES Act and the Family First Response Act. And I think a lot of it has to do with knowing your rights and knowing how to not work the system, but how to navigate the system so you are protected. A lot of people don't understand how FMLA works as well in this situation.
Right.
And I know for a lot of Latinos, especially Latinas, we're considered like the caregivers and the caretakers in our family. So I think it's really important to like totally give yourself like a crash course on how FMLA works and how COVID-19 exceptions can work for you and your employer.
That's a really good point. And for those who are watching who don't know, FMLA is the Family Medical Leave Act. So I think that's a really good point you make, that sometimes the stories that we hear of people having a hard time with some of these benefits has less to do with the fact that they're not available and more to do with the fact that there's not a lot of education out there about it. And then the system can be very difficult to navigate.
It's definitely difficult to navigate, especially if you don't have the right tools or you don't know. I just did a COVID-19 video over on my YouTube channel, and I explained the different exceptions that people are making for COVID-19 and how you actually go about to apply for your benefits on your unemployment insurance if it is applicable to your situation. But one thing I do want to bring up to this point is not everybody is eligible for unemployment. And that's something that as a society, we tend to forget. A lot of people don't know that if there's this common misconception that people come over here and get everything for free, and that's not true. In order to qualify for unemployment insurance or any type of state aid, you have to have a social security number or you have to have an employee identification number. If you do not have one of those numbers and you're technically not paying legal taxes through your payroll, you do not qualify for unemployment or state aid.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to bring up. And then also another good point to bring up, like you were talking about, is you're saying access to the tools. So what are some of the tools that people maybe don't know about or maybe don't have access to in some of these higher risk communities? What are some of the tools that they're kind of missing?
Okay, so we already talked about the CARES Act and the Family Resource Act, and we talked about how you are eligible for some PTO off of that. Yes, people are trying to figure out how to and I'm not going to say like some employers probably are doing that. They're like, we're not going to sign off on it, but there are a lot more employers that are acknowledging it. And under the CARES Act and Family First Resource Act, Response Act, you actually get 2 weeks of PTO at your current rate of employment, and then you can keep reapplying for 2 weeks, and then it goes off into your employer, and then eventually they have the chance to move you on to unemployment. But by that act being passed, you have at least 80 hours of PTO at no expense to you, and it doesn't dip into your PTO account balance accrual that you may have with your current employer.
Okay, so how would people find out about this? Like
Well,
that's the thing, right? Like how do people find out about these things?
so that's one of my other tools. It's Google. And so
Yay, Google.
I am such like a Google person. I follow Rachel Hollis, and she explains that she barely graduated high school and she's been able to build this multi-million-dollar empire by using Google. And so I'm like, I'm going to Google everything in my life now, like Rachel Hollis. And so you go ahead and you can type in Google, you can type in your state, and you can type in like assistance for this or resources for that. I actually had a friend who experienced like a death kind of in their family, like a friend of a friend type of thing. And I was able to go on Google and like look up burial assistance for New York and send that to them. They actually used it. So, I mean, that's just one of the tools that I was able to use to find the CARES Act. So sometimes it's just, pull up Google and you have to do a little bit of research. Another way that you can find tools for yourself is state assistance. So every state has a Department of Economic Security. We call it the DES. In Arizona, I know other states call it other things, but your Department of Labor in your state or your Department of State Assistance in whatever state you live in. A lot of you will qualify for assistance if you are affected by COVID-19. And it's my firm belief that now is not the time to be prideful, and now is not the time to do any of that, especially if you are from a vulnerable or high risk population. Now is the time to take advantage of resources that are offered to you. So your financial situation doesn't get worse, or, you're not taking steps back. For the longest time in my life, every step forward I'd take a step back, and vice versa. And so, use what you're able to use. And then I actually found another website that I'll go ahead and I'll share with you guys. It's called informedimmigrant.com. It's a national database, and it consists of different national organizations that have money specifically to help both documented and undocumented immigrants that need assistance at this time. And they also have a database per state that tells you what organizations and what part of your state have access to funds, or you can access for general assistance.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, that'd be awesome if you could share that with us. So one of the questions that I had as well is, so you've mentioned the internet a lot. What if you don't have internet access? So there are, I live in a rural state where actually a surprising amount of our rural state does not have internet access. And so it's actually causing problems right now in my state as we try and like get these unemployment benefits and all this other stuff because people can't get the internet.
So even Arizona is also very rural. You can only declare bankruptcy in the city of Phoenix, Arizona, and I don't think a lot of people know that. So I have
interesting.
Yeah, and like there's a lawyer, like the town where I'm from in northern Arizona, there's like one like bankruptcy state lawyer, and he goes to each city for 1 day a week. So I understand the whole rural thing, and a lot of the kids here don't have access to internet, which makes the online education very hard.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't have access to the internet, like so many of us do not, I would highly suggest going to your local community center or utilizing your network. And so I'm considered a vulnerable high-risk person. I have a lot of autoimmune disorders, and I have severe asthma. So if I were to get COVID-19, knock on wood, I would be like probably not good. So I've been able to like really tap into my network and ask people like if they know like if someone is hiring, or ask someone if like they know where I could have access to the internet, or that kind of thing. I would just say like ask. It's like your biggest thing is to ask. And then a lot of people don't realize this, but fast food restaurants, I feel like there's a fast food restaurant in every town in America, and they all have Wi-Fi that you can tap into.
That's a really interesting point because now that I think about it, you're right. I mean, you could go, even though the dining rooms are closed in many of these restaurants, you could go and just park outside the restaurant
Uh-huh.
and access the Wi-Fi.
That's how some of the kids in Arizona are actually doing their schoolwork is they are sitting outside of McDonald's here in Phoenix and tapping into the Wi-Fi.
Interesting. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And Wi-Fi's at libraries still work. So, I mean, you could pull up to the library and you could like use their internet. So places that usually offer free internet are still offering free internet that didn't go away because of COVID-19.
Right. Yeah. And so you can be, even if you can't go inside, you can sit on
Mm-hmm.
the lawn or sit in the parking lot and get access to that. That's a really good point. Okay. So moving on here, what are some of the
Oh,
ways? Oh,
one
go
more
ahead.
one more quick thing. So in every state there is like a number you can call. So in Phoenix it's 211 and you don't have to have access to the internet to do it. You just have to somehow have access to a phone. So you can bum a phone off somebody at the bus stop, I don't know. But it's a toll-free number and you dial it and it will give you like a list of resources that you can tap into and it'll give you their number and their address. So there is a way to find out resources that don't include the internet.
Okay. That's awesome. Good call. Okay, so moving on. So, what are some of the systemic issues that have led to this? Now, we talked about this briefly at the beginning. We talked about some of the issues around redlining, and what are some of the other systemic issues that people run into that are magnified, or even perhaps, I mean, they were always there, but now suddenly we're more aware of them, or they become more magnified because of a situation like this.
I think a lot of it, like one of the issues that I saw, like doing research for this episode, was that a lot of people who are on disability don't have access to the stimulus checks yet. They still haven't
Interesting.
received their stimulus check. If you solely rely on disability, or if you make a certain amount of money, which is always under, I'm not going to say usually, it's always under the poverty line, you do not have to, you're not required to file federal taxes. You're not required to file taxes at all on that, right? And
Right.
so people don't report to the IRS, they don't file taxes, and so they're eligible for this stimulus money, but this IRS doesn't have access to their checking account. And I did more research on this. The IRS is actually releasing all the people who qualified for the stimulus and filed their 2019 taxes first. So all those people are the people that have gotten the first wave of the stimulus benefit. And now they're going to go back and they're going to issue it to the 2018 people that are eligible for the stimulus package but haven't filed yet for 2019. And then you have all the vulnerable populations, such as people on disability, who do not qualify, like who haven't filed taxes, and then they're going to start to access them. So they say it might be until the end of August that some of these people are getting their stimulus checks. And that goes for the same of people that don't have access to checking accounts. I know some people from different cultures don't believe in keeping your money in the bank. My grandma kept it in a drawer in our house. And so that was one of the reasons that I got reported to check systems when I was 19, because I didn't understand how a checking account worked. And
Hmm.
I had money in the red and I like thought it was like a credit card account. I was like, oh, I'll just pay that off, you know, it'll be fine. So yeah, I was 19 years old and I had like an account and check system. So that was a little scary. So you have people who don't, file taxes. The IRS doesn't have their direct deposit information. You have people that don't have checking accounts that have to wait for a live check. And then, like I said earlier, if you do not pay federal or state tax through your employer, say you get paid under the table, you're not eligible for a stimulus package. You're not eligible for a stimulus. You're not eligible for unemployment. You're not eligible for any of that if you technically are not paying into the federal system. And I do quote unquote because immigrants pay tons of money into taxes every day. Every time you buy a good, like you buy a book or you buy anything that is taxable, that 8 to 10% tax, dependent on what state you're living in, all that money goes into your state. That's like your state tax. And so immigrants who are documented and undocumented pay into that tax every single day, yet they're not eligible for any of that funding.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point you make that so many of them are paying into the system. So and we talk about this paying under the table and what and that kind of really puts you at a disadvantage. So what in our system really kind of pushes that? What in our system is really kind of enabling this sort of behavior, I guess?
What enables people to hire other people under the table?
Yeah, like why is it? Because like supposedly, right? Supposedly there's, like are there any like any penalties for businesses who do this or anything like that? Or are they really
I'm
just
sure there is, but however, I do not know what those penalties are, but I'm
okay.
sure there is. I know someone whose family owns a restaurant, and if you go in and work so many hours in that restaurant, they'll pay you cash under the table.
Okay.
So, I mean, I don't know what enables people to do it, but I know it's cheaper to pay someone under the table than it is to actually hire them on as an employee and pay
Right.
for their benefits and pay into unemployment and pay for all that kind of stuff. So I feel like a lot of people who are business owners find it's cheaper to do that than go ahead and hire someone like full on. I also think it's dependent on the business. Maybe they don't know the practices, but there's always somebody who's going to like do a job for a lesser amount than you.
Mm.
And some of the times it is people who are paid under the table and who are okay with that. So, I mean, it kind of goes back to the employer too. Like, they're the ones that are offering people these jobs under the table. So, as much as it's, people are working under the table and, people shouldn't be doing this job for $5 when minimum wage is $10, like, I get that. But I also think that there should be responsibility held with that employer. And a lot of people seem to overlook that, especially when it comes to issues of immigration.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Okay. Are there any other resources or any other things that you would like to point out at this time before we start like really diving into any questions there might be?
I don't think so. I think I was able to cover everything that I had wanted to share. I did have a question. Someone had asked me like other ways that you can help if you are
Oh,
like
yes.
you just want to help somebody. So I've just thought of some ideas, and I just said like organizations, nonprofits like the one I work for. We're always looking for people to donate their time, their energy, or their money to a cause. I joke around that if you are close to me, you have worked at my employer. So I have had my partner come in and do tons of stuff with my kids. I've had all my friends go and stuff name tags for hours for a special event once. I've had people that like online bloggers that I know, I've like texted them or messaged them and been like, hey, can you judge this really quickly? Or can you help me with this project really quickly? So, I mean, I've been like that's the kind of thing I would say, like, look into donating your time, look into donating your energy. And then I also said, call a friend. Maybe you know somebody who is like, having a harder time than usual. I had a friend that shared a fundraiser, and his friend was looking for money to find a bike. And I donated to that cause, and I was like, here's money for a bike. And then this really isn't considered like, I don't think donating to the cause, but like my niece has lost her job due to COVID-19. She's on furlough right now. And she was like, I was like, play this game with me, play this Sims. I've been playing this Sims like crazy. And I was like, play
Yeah.
this Sims with me. And she's like, I don't have any Sims money. So I Venmoed her some money so she could play the Sims with me. And so she could like go get a coffee or something. So, I mean, it's just those like little things, or maybe asking like if your elderly neighbor needs anything. Before he passed, I had a 90-year-old next door neighbor, and I miss him so much, but I would take him to the grocery store, or I would stop and get him stuff at the groceries, like at the store when I could. And it's just those little things that like help people keep their humanity as long as they can.
Yeah, I love that. Keeping your humanity. I've been actually, I was rushing here after my shift at the food basket because I've been volunteering at the food basket. And that's another
Mhm.
local resource to look for when you are in times like this. It's really important to understand, like, to look for those resources, and like your local community food basket is probably
Yeah, and they're not gonna
number
ask
one.
you. Yeah, they're not gonna ask you for a check. Like I know in Arizona, they don't ask you for like paycheck stubs. They don't ask you for that kind of stuff or your social. They just you're like, I need a food basket or I need a food box, and they're like, here, like you obviously need food if you're that down and out to go to a food pantry and ask for assistance. So I'm glad that they don't use like income or anything like that against you.
It's been really interesting and eye-opening for me. So we do have a question from the live stream. So this is a question from an anonymous questioner. It says, can you talk about financial priorities for those at risk? How do they know where to start? And do you have a checklist for what to do first? Because it can be overwhelming all at once. So there's a question there from our live stream. What are some of the financial priorities for those at risk? What should they focus on first?
Oh my God, this is such a good question. And this anonymous person has like motivated me to do a new video and to come up with a freebie for a checklist on Money Smart Latina. So thank you for the inspiration. I highly suggest your hierarchy of needs. And so I'm not even going to attempt to say his name because I'll butcher it. It's like
Maslow. It's
Maslow.
Maslow.
So it's this like famous like I
Yeah.
don't know what he is, philosopher, I don't know, but he does this hierarchy of needs, and you think of it as a shape of a pyramid, and it just says what people need, and then in the level they need and what should come first. So your first priority of getting your finances together or trying to put like a band-aid on your financial bleed is the stuff that you need, like you absolutely need. So you absolutely need your shelter, right? You have to have a place to stay. You have to have food, right? You have to be able to eat. You have to have gas in your car if that is your way to go to work. And then you have to have like utilities and then clothes on your back. So first case first, like those are the things you need to make sure you have like a handle on and you pay first. Like you have to have a place to live and you have to have a way to go to work. If you don't have a car, but you still have to go to work, I would suggest buying a bus pass or subway pass or however you're going to get to work. And then from there, you can start looking at like stuff that you would benefit from, but you don't necessarily need. Like I obviously benefit from my iPhone, but I don't need my iPhone. I love you. Don't take that seriously, iPhone. Don't be mad at me. But like you do not have to you don't need an iPhone. You could go and get, they call it an Obama phone. You could go get an Obama phone, go get a phone from SafeLink, or you could go to Cricket or Metro Wireless and, you know, like get service for like $30 a month. So that's the kind of thing that you would look at your next step. And so you need access to a phone, you need food, you need shelter, and then kind of just start going from there. Like you don't need designer makeup or you don't need extra clothes. Like chances are you don't need that kind of stuff. It's just kind of like what you absolutely need to survive. And so once you have those bases covered, then it's going to be easier for you to start working on the next step of whatever your financial journey or whatever your financial plan needs to be.
Yeah, and I think we were talking a little bit about resources as well, and this is the time to ask for help. Using
Yes,
that food bank, going to
yes.
those community resources, going to those state resources and finding those are going to help you free up some of your finances for other things that maybe you can't get that way. So
Yep.
this
And
is
then,
yeah,
yeah.
this is where
And
looking for those resources comes in as well.
yeah, definitely looking for those resources. I also like I highly suggest like that number, like the toll-free number that'll give you the resources, or you can stop at a community resource center. I know in the city of Peoria, it's a suburb of Phoenix. They have we have one of our programs located in the community center, and so the community center they have like other nonprofits in there, and they're like, oh, we have excess amount of money for utility assistance this month. Please refer people to that. We owe funds. People at the state office are like, oh, we have extra money for people that if they need to get back into employment to give them clothes or to give them food assistance or to give them transportation assistance. A lot of times when you go to these nonprofits or these foundations, you want to ask them for supportive services. And then that's the kind of stuff that they can help you with. That's like utility assistance, phone assistance, clothing, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a good point. And then also I think it's worth mentioning too real quick that, when you were talking about that hierarchy of needs, I was also thinking of like when you're talking about bills and trying to figure out which bills you want to pay, you start with those needs, right? You got to pay for the housing first. If you've got that car payment you need to make, you got to do those things first. And a lot of credit card companies, a lot of banks are offering COVID-19 relief. So if you can't make all of your bill payments, give those folks a call, see what kind of programs and relief they're offering now to kind of give you that breathing space.
Yeah, and that's definitely a good point. And then there's also like Cox Communications. Cox Communications is the internet provider in Arizona. And so if you're hit by COVID-19, what they're doing is they're giving you like internet free for so many months, or you could have internet for like $10 a month. So, or they'll let you like postpone a bit, like postpone your bill. AT&T is doing the same thing. So I would take advantage of that as much as I possibly could. I'm not going to lie, I even took advantage of my car payment because I wasn't entirely sure what COVID-19 was going to look like for my employer. I do work for a nonprofit setting, a nonprofit organization, and we are highly reliant on donors being gracious with their money. And so we've been kind of like, okay, like what's going on? And I'm happy and I'm very blessed to say my job is guaranteed at the moment, but at the same time, I was still trying to like hoard as much cash as I can. So even and I've been in personal finance for like so long, even I took advantage of one of those relief programs. I called Ally and was like, can I have a forbearance?
Yeah. And I mean, and yes, you're going to have to pay the interest on that eventually, and it'll all be added to the end of your own. It'll all be tacked on. But when you need a little bit of financial breathing room right now, these are things that can help.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. So here's another question we have. It says, what about the opening up of states? That's in quotes. Will this erase concerns for those at risk, or will it actually put more people at risk? So this is also something I was kind of referring to a little bit earlier with the CARES Act stuff. Like, for instance, in my state, we have a partial opening, and basically they're saying, well, if your employer says you have to come back to work, you can't keep collecting the unemployment anymore, and you just have to come back to work regardless. So what do you think of this, like, opening of states? Do you think it's going to put people more at risk?
I feel like a politician right now, and
Right.
I don't want to
don't make me answer this question.
I don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. That's kind of how I feel about that. But I will go back, and I'm looking at the policy right now for the CARES Act. And so I do not know enough to say that your employer is going to be like, you can't come, like, you don't have to do, like, you have to come to work. Like, I don't know about that, because the CARES Act says that if you specifically state that you are a high risk population and you are going to be SOL if you contract COVID, you qualify for the unemployment exception. It's not, you don't qualify for just unemployment, like to qualify for it, you qualify for it under the COVID-19 exceptions.
That's good to know. Yep. That's good to know.
While you qualify for it. If you are fearful for your health, you qualify for unemployment. Don't let anyone bully you, say you don't, you qualify for it.
That's good to know.
And then how do I feel about states reopening? I feel like a lot more people are going to get sick, and I will be pleasantly surprised if we do not have a second wave this summer. That's my personal opinion, and I'm sticking to it.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I think a lot of people have just made the point that, like, it really helps to have that, the testing and the tracing, which we haven't really rolled out a whole lot of in some states. And really, I think it's going to be a state to state thing, right? Like, every state is different.
Arizona is third to last for testing in the nation. And we have been very strict about, not very strict, but we've been a lot stricter than other states about staying at home. And again, my opinion, but we have decided to reopen up our state. And again, I think that, I think our economy was hurting, and I'm not going to say it wasn't, but I'm not going to say that that should take precedence over helping people that are actually healthy enough to go to work.
Yeah.
So what's the good of having a booming economy if no one can work in it?
Yeah. And so just kind of bring that back to high risk populations and everything. So when we're talking about high risk populations and we're talking about people who are going to be economically disadvantaged, I mean, it's really kind of a trade-off, right? With these high risk populations, has it always been kind of a trade-off between, do we value their lives and their health, or do we value the economic capital that they bring to the community? Like,
Oh yeah, no, because the people, like, and again, like, this is just my opinion, a lot of the people that are arguing about opening back the economy, or they need to do this and that, go to the salon or go to the store, a lot of these people are people that are currently teleworking from home.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't like really, it's not really going to affect them because they're not going to be on the front line. And that's just some of them. Some people, like restaurant owners, bartenders, people in the service industry, I know a lot of them have been affected and they do want to get back to work. But I also know a lot of people who are in the service industry and they don't want to be in a room with like 25, 30 people, like a 20 by 20 room or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
So, and you're right, a lot of people from these communities are ones that work on a front line, whether that is, you know, they're the ones that are working like in the service industry, or they're working like, you know, like at the part-time jobs. A lot of people who are disabled that qualify for Social Security still work part-time. They're allowed to work part-time as long as they don't make up to like a certain amount of money, because if they make a certain amount of money, then they lose their benefits. So it's like a double-edged sword. But your part-time people are the people that are going to get let go first, and they're probably going to be the people that you're going to be utilizing for the COVID-19 like first line stuff, because you don't pay benefits for them. I know a lot of people, I know in some states, if you're part-time, you get benefits. And then some states, if you're not part-time, you don't. So it's just kind of like a double-edged sword.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, because so much of this is done on a state by state basis
It
that
really is.
it's really hard to figure out like exactly what is going to help you in your own state.
Right. But the COVID-19 exceptions, that is a national unemployment exception. So if you do not feel safe going to work, you don't feel safe. Or even if you feel safe, but you're taking care of your grandma and your grandma's a high risk population, I know people that have contracted COVID-19 and they're asymptomatic and they bring it home to their family members, and their family members get so sick they go to the ICU. Like, that's the weird thing about this virus.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they're saying it's a lot of pre-existing conditions are the ones that are getting hit the hardest. And they're actually finding too that it's causing blood clots, and some people are getting blood clots from this disease. That's why people are having strokes and heart attacks and that kind of thing. So, I mean, if you're scared for yourself, for your own safety, or you're scared for your grandma and bringing it home to her, you qualify for that exception. And that's a national exception.
All right. Awesome. All right. I am checking to see if we have any more questions here. And it looks like the questions have slowed a little bit here. So we'll go ahead and just, why don't you tell folks real quick where they can find you on the interwebs?
Oh, I'd love to. Tell me more.
Yeah, please tell me more.
If you guys are listening to this, you can't see that I just flipped my hair back. So you can find me on moneysmartlatina.com, where Latinas and finance meet. You can find me on YouTube for Money Smart Latina. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook. Twitter, I did something a little different. My handle there is According Athena, but if you type in Money Smart Latina, I will pop up. So you can find me all over the interweb, but I mainly am posting cat photos on Instagram these days.
And they are good cat photos.
Right? He is a sexy cat.
He is a sexy cat. I'm allergic to cats, but he's still sexy.
Harrison makes you want to have a cat though, right?
He kind of does. He kind of does.
I'm just
really
saying.
He kind of does. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Athena. Thank you for talking a little bit about high risk populations and where they can get help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And these are some great questions, and I'm motivated to like go back in the Money Smart Latina studio and go make some videos.
That's right. Do it. Make some videos. But yeah, so I hope you'll tune in. We have another webinar coming up on Thursday, and this one is about unemployment and how to manage unemployment during this time. So make sure you tune in Thursday for this. Check out the Plutus Foundation Facebook page for more information about upcoming events. We have plenty of upcoming webinars and events and podcast episodes that can help you at this time. So go to that Plutus Foundation webpage and check that out, and make sure you're tuning in. And then hopefully we'll see you next time.
All right. Sounds good. Bye, guys. Thanks for having me.
Bye, everybody.